Hi guys, I'm Andrew. Welcome to another video. If you've tried to buy a bike during this pandemic, you've probably found it almost impossible to find anything in a bike shop. Most bike shops and big box stores have been sold out for months, and they're not getting any new inventory for almost the entire year. So with that being said, almost the only place to look is the used market. So when it came time to buy a bike for my wife, she was going to be commuting to work. I took a look on the used market on Kijiji here in Ontario, and I picked up this old Rally here, nice pink one, and I paid $120 for it. I was able to get it right away, and this is going to be great for her to ride to work. So a few things that I like about this bike for her, and some of the features I would recommend you look for in a used bike. Maybe you're going to be commuting, riding around, whatever it is. This is probably a 1970s, 1980s steel frame road bike. A little bit woman's geometry with the lower top tube here, so it is a woman specific. It's also pink, so a little more, feminine. Or you could rock it if you're a guy, I would totally ride this as well. But I like this style frame, this circle steel frame from the 1970s, 80s. It's really, really sturdy. These are almost indestructible. You can barely ever break these. They last forever, and they're really good quality. So you can lean this up against a bike rack. It's not going to damage it very much. They're really nice to ride too because it absorbs a lot of vibration. The only downside is it's a little bit heavy. So that's the only downside. But for a bike you're just going to be riding around, that's not too big of a problem. So in regards to the frame, I would look for something like this, and then just try to find something that's not super rusty. So underneath the fenders, you can also see it's got these really wide, thick tires, almost mountain bike-like tires. It's 26 by 2.125 inch tires. So it's quite wide. It's quite thick here as well, and that's going to give really good comfort and also really good control on the bike. So she's going to feel really stable, and she also won't feel the bumps when she's riding this. So just another little feature to look for. I like if it's just a round the town bike, your commutes or you're riding or in around 5 kilometers. Something like this is great. You don't need to get a thin race tire. When I took a look at this bike as well, I also saw that all of this cabling is almost brand new. So all of the interior and exterior cables on this bike, they're in perfect condition. Sometimes with these older ones, they get really rusty, but in this case, it's all brand new. So that was a really great value-added feature for this bike. So all the cables here, all the way through the bike, that's not going to be something I have to work on. See how it's got like the head badge here too? And like these little emblems? Those type of things are, I like these. This like just gives a nice quality. They don't make it, like they just put a sticker now. They put like a sticker on and it peels off, but this is like the bolted head badge. You've got the, embossed frame design here on the forks. Like you can feel it, it's 3D. It's pressed in there, and same with this, it's riveted in. So a bike like this, even though it's 20, 30 years old, it's a bit old, you're going to have to do a bit of work to it. I would still recommend something like this over a current bike from a big box store like Canadian Tire or Walmart. The reason being is that the quality on this is just much, much higher than an existing bike for $100 or $200 from Canadian Tire. They're as cheap as you can possibly make them. They come out of tune really quick, the parts fail really quick, and they just don't last that long. This bike is 30 years old, and it still has a ton of life left in it. The frame's in great condition, the wheels are straight, everything's holding together. So that's why I really like these type of bikes. I've got a couple other ones myself, and these just last forever, and you can get them at a really good value. So the price I like to recommend is around anywhere from $100 to $300 for something like this. And there's tons of options on Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, things like that. When you are looking though, you're gonna have to pay attention because they're older. Some of them are gonna have some issues. So this bike is in pretty good shape, but it does have some issues presented. The seller was upfront about that. But those are gonna be things you may have to address. When you buy a brand new bike in the store, it comes more or less ready to go. But with a used bike like this, you may have to change some things up front just to help with the riding. So I'm going to show you a few of the issues I spotted on this bike that we're going to address, just to help you, learn to spot them yourself. So the first thing I noticed on this bike was with the front brakes and even the rear brakes. There's almost no braking power right now. So what's happening right now is I'm squeezing the lever on the handlebar, and the lever's coming all the way back to the handlebar. So you can see there's no point. A brake, when it's fully properly adjusted, should stop here and there should be braking pressure, but this brake is coming all the way and it's still not stopping the wheel. So the brakes right now, front and even the back one, isn't even attached. The back brake is not attached. You can see the cable here is completely loose and the rear brake is detached right now. So those are going to be a couple areas. You have to have brakes on the bike. So both of the brakes are going to have to be adjusted just for safety, because right now this bike actually doesn't stop. I had to walk it here and it doesn't have brakes right now. So the other big problem that I noticed with this bike has to do with the drivetrain. More specifically, it's going to come down to some of the bearings in the rear part of the free hub assembly. But let's come down here and take a look. So right there is what's happening. The bike will coast, and then you see it suddenly stops. It has a jerking point, like this. Right now I'm still pedaling backwards, but you can see it's not coasting. It catches. So what's happening is the rear freewheel assembly, there's dirt inside the bearings here. There's dirt inside this assembly here, and it's not allowing this to spin freely all the time. So what's going to happen is maybe you're coasting, and then all of a sudden it'll catch, it'll stop spinning here. You won't be able to coast. You'll get something called chain suck. The chain will get sucked into the wheel here, and you risk bursting your tire, damaging your chain, and also damaging your frame. So it is possible to service this by spraying some oil, some penetrating lubricant inside this assembly here, which, we'll give it a try. But if that doesn't work, we're going to have to change this entire assembly. So this piece here is going to be something that has to get changed. Now, the downside with this is that because I've now changed this, I have to take a look at the chain. And I may have to change the chain as well, because oftentimes this piece, the freewheel, and the chain wear at the same rate. So if this is, let's say, 20 years old, and this is 20 years old, and I put a brand new one on here, the 20-year-old chain doesn't like the brand new one because these have worn at the same rate. So what's probably going to happen, I'm going to measure this chain's wear with the chain checker tool just to get an idea of where it's at right now. But it's very likely that if we do change this part, I'm going to also have to change this part. And that's just something, if you're buying a used bike, you have to consider. If there's a problem maybe with the chain, maybe the chain's rusty, you might have to change it. If there's a problem with the freewheel or the cassette, whichever standard you have, you also may have to change this. Now, fortunately on a bike like this, that's why I like them as well, the parts are really cheap. So a part like this is only about $20, a chain's $20 to $25. It's not too hard to get them installed. So we know this bike has a problem with the freewheel. It's catching a little bit. We know we probably are going to have to change that piece. And now we're going to take a look at the chain. So to do that, I've got my chain checker tool right here. And that's a tool that we can stick into the chain to determine the chain wear. We can see, if that chain has stretched over time. The metal plates on the chain have caused friction within the metal, and it's caused it to extend out longer than it should be. And that's the issue. If it stretches out too long, it won't be compatible with a new freewheel. So this tool is going to help us check to see what state the chain is in. There's 2 points of measurement. We have our 0.5 measurement, and then on the other side our 0.75 measurement. I'm going to check both wears. So this is about halfway worn. This is about 3/4 or almost pretty much fully worn at this point. So I put some tension on the chain, insert the back component here inside the chain. And you can see how now this goes inside the chain, which is indicating to me that the chain has stretched to the lower level 0.5. Now we're going to flip it and see if it's also stretched to the 0.75 on this. So same thing here, tension on the chain. Okay, it also goes in. If this wasn't worn, the chain checker would stop here. It wouldn't go inside the chain. It would stop here. It would be like this here. But because this chain is stretched, it goes all the way in, which indicates that this chain is completely worn out. So if we change this piece, the grooves inside here, these ramps, these grooves, they have also stretched out, like they have lost material on here and here to accommodate the stretched chain over time. So when you have an old chain and an old freewheel, they work together, they're fine. But if you only change one of them, we're going to change this piece, the ramps are going to be narrower. So the chain won't work with the narrower ramps here, the narrower grooves. It'll be like more of a tighter U shape that won't work. So in this case, if we change this, we are going to have to change this as well. So as we can see with our bike, it's worn out on the freewheel, it's worn out on the chain, and we can tell from our chain checker tool that that's the case. So if you are buying a used bike yourself, definitely recommend bringing one of these along. It's about a $10 tool, but what you can do is you can measure up front before buying a bike. If you're gonna have to replace a chain, if you're gonna have to replace a cassette, you can start to put a picture in your mind of how much cost you're looking at before you even buy the bike. And then you could tell the seller, look, your chain is completely worn out, your cassette is completely worn out. I need to see a little bit better price here because I'm gonna have to change, $40, $50. If it's a higher end bike, you might be looking at hundreds of dollars worth of parts. I myself brought this to one bike I was looking at. I measured a worn chain, and it also indicated to me the front chain rings were worn out and the rear chain rings, the cassette was worn out. And I estimated the cost to be over $400 to fix those problems, just because I brought this and I inspected the wear. And then I just told the person selling the bike I wasn't going to be buying that bike because it just didn't make sense at that point for the price he was asking. So it's always worthwhile, bring something like this along. If you don't have it, just take a look at the chain, ask the seller if they've replaced the chain recently, if they've done any maintenance on it, if they've oiled it. If it looks rusty, you're probably going to have to change it. But that is a very common part on a used bike that you're going to have to inspect very closely and quite likely change when you take possession of it. So thanks for tuning in and checking out this vintage rally bike that I bought for my wife. Tune in for part 2 when I fix all of these issues that we had with this bike, and then we get it out and have her test ride that for us. So if you found this video interesting and you're thinking of repairing your own bike, buying a used bike yourself, and you want to learn how to do that, we actually have a full step-by-step course on how to work on your own bike. You can check the description box below for more details on that. Give it a check out. We got a few free videos on some maintenance tips and a few little things that you can learn. Just check it out, description box below.